It was certainly not my intention to have spoken at today's sitting of Parliament for what I considered to be a very simple academic exercise that we were about to make a case for today. I consider that all of the speakers on the government side thus far would have done justice to the rationale behind what we are trying to achieve as we continue to battle the community spread that came upon us as of the 19th of May. So I will not venture in terms of laboring any points that have been so ably made by all of the previous speakers, save and except when the occasion occurs when statements are being made, particularly from ministerial portfolios over which I have erstwhile responsibility. I think it is incumbent on me to set the record straight. I listened today at the cases that were made relative to the issue of the plight of our people. Yes, I understand that some of our people are suffering as a result of the fact that they might be in quarantine, some might be in home isolation, as the case might be, and yet there are still those other persons who we normally have, who we consider to be the most vulnerable among us, who will always require assistance. Much of this assistance is being dealt with through the COVID-19 task force, ably led by the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Social Services, Mrs. Janelle Lewis Tafari, for which there is a cross-sectional, multidisciplinary committee that has been put together to respond in a sensible manner to the needs of our people. That committee would have gone into high gear as of that same first weekend when we would have discovered cases at the Sandy Point Primary School as well as the Charles E. Mills Secondary School. And it is for that reason why we would have heard later on that other persons have come on board. There have been other persons who would have come on board beside the radio personality, Mr. E.K. Flanders. For example, there's Mickey Weintraub from Mickey's Hope Foundation, and countless other individuals in this country who give without getting noticed, who give without asking for thanks. And these individuals, I would take this opportunity to thank them. They know who they are, and they continue to partner with government in responding to the needs of our people. Up to the point when Mr. Flanders would have contributed to the effort, this project was in place for something like 4 weeks. Am I correct, Honorable AG? That is correct. And we did not object to him taking part because, as we kept saying, we want an all-of-society approach to respond to the crisis that is in front of us, because COVID-19 is not a respecter of persons. However, Mr. Speaker, at the same time, I had reason to focus on another issue, a plight related to COVID-19, and it has to do with the issue of severance payments that have been made to persons who would have been displaced as a result of the pandemic. The majority of these persons are individuals who work in the hotel and tourism sector, or the allied services sector, as we call them from time to time. I would have heard two speakers on the opposite benches make statements and give out figures that are entirely not accurate. And I would wish to let the country know, using this platform, exactly what is the state of play when it comes to the Severance Payment Fund, especially and insofar as the amounts due to persons displaced by COVID-19. And with your permission, I will read directly from my phone where I have the data. As of today's date, Monday, the 28th of June, 2021, the total number of severance claims received was 2,429, not 4,000. The total number of long service gratuity claims, which is different but still connected, is 59 because it impacts upon the same fund. Because let us not forget that in 2013, when the long service gratuity was put in place, the fund was never capitalized, and as a result of that, persons had to be paid out of the severance payment fund to satisfy their claims made against long service gratuity. The total number of severance payment claims that are pending for 2020 is 20. I repeat, the total number of severance payment claims pending from 2020 are 20 claims. The total number of claims being processed at this particular time is 26. The total number of claims processed to date, 2,324 against 2,429 that were received. The total number of claims, therefore, that have been paid out to date, 2,295 claims. And the total number of claims awaiting payment, 29. And let me just explain what we mean by awaiting payment. It means that we have put in place a three-tiered system of collecting data and verifying data, and then at the same time going the extra step with the audit department to put in place a procedure to ensure that what someone is entitled to is what they are going to get. So that is the state of play. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I say all of that to say this, that as of today's date, this government has paid out in total $36,641,166.81. But having said that, to clarify that point for the two members opposite who made erroneous claims earlier today, it caused me to have my memory jolted, and if you can bear with me. In 2016, this government would have made a commitment, 2015 rather, before we took office, that we would have paid out to the sugar workers outstanding gratuities that had been owed to them since July of 2005. At that time, I had the privilege of preparing an SSMC brief based on data that I would have garnered from the UNDP report that was most current at the time, as well as data that was provided by Ms. Brenda Caesar, who was the person leading the project of the severance payments in 2005 July, and then at that time she was attached to the Ministry of Finance. And based on the data that I would have gotten from Ms. Caesar, and I'm quite happy to turn in a copy of this, even though it's all academic and historical at this point, at that time of the closure in July 2005, the total amount of gratuities outstanding to sugar workers was 44 million EC dollars. However, only 28 million was paid to the workers after the July 2005 closure. So therefore, in 10 years, since 2005 up to 2015, when we took office, a balance of 16 million was outstanding. That 16 million was paid out right down to the penny to the outstanding claims that were in the system. As I indicated, Madam Deputy Speaker, I can provide the data for you based on what our research would have shown us, which then informed the policy decision that we would have taken. So I say all of this to say this, that we have to be careful when we make statements as leaders, especially leaders in a parliament, that what you present to the public is accurate. I make it a point of order. I am not perfect, but I try my best that when I stand up in this house or I stand before a microphone anywhere, or if I have to sign my name to any document, that I am certain that the data in front of me, especially data for which I am responsible, is accurate to the best of my knowledge. So I just wanted to set the record straight on that matter. We understand that COVID would have affected a lot of persons and created a lot of socioeconomic hardship. But we have responded as best as we could under the circumstances. Let us not forget that this economy for St. Kitts and Nevis was brought to its knees just like every other economy, from first world countries come down to the banana republic type of countries, as we like to call them. But we have done commendably well in terms of responding to the crisis in spite of our smallness, in spite of our small tax base, and in spite of our small private sector. It is no small measure for our country to dig deep and find $120 million on the front end of a pandemic. And as we speak, the Prime Minister was being very conservative in not mentioning this morning. But one of the things he neglected to mention is that as we speak, the Cabinet is currently having in front of it the next iteration of a stimulus package. But this morning was neither the time or place to deal with that, because we wanted to focus on the issue of extending a state of emergency that allows our security forces, allows the Ministry of Health to do what they have to do to contain the virus, to do testing and contact tracing, and do so in a manner that at the same time protects the health and the safety of all concerned.
Sorry, member for number 6.
We do this, Madam Deputy Speaker, in the interest of protecting everyone. Much has been said earlier in terms of people not being responsibly personally for their own health and safety. We have heard the horror stories in terms of people leaving home quarantine, leaving isolation, and we would have preferred if they wouldn't. At the same time, the government has hired and trained a full cadre of compliance officers to assist us in this task. But it is not reasonable, neither is it practical, to expect that one compliance officer could be placed at the home of each and every individual and to track the movements of each and every individual. Our security forces, outside of the compliance team, they're equally challenged. I doubt that our police force has more than 500 officers, if so many. And certainly our defense force cannot even boast of having 300 officers. But we are doing the best we can with what we have in front of us. And it is that very reason that we keep articulating the mantra that we need an all-of-society approach to do what we have to do. There's one final point I wish to make, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it has to do with the whole issue of the point raised by the Honorable Attorney General in noting the fact that we would have invited all political parties to meet with us. I think it was some 2 months ago, or 2.5 months ago. But while I am saying this, and I'm listening to persons opposite talking about finally, after a year, if we care about our country, why do you have to wait for an invitation from the task force? Every other NGO, private citizens, etc., have had an opportunity and have been welcomed by the task force to come and meet with us. We have rejected no one. And we will continue not to reject anyone, because every single individual in this country has a stake in this country and has a role to play. So it is not about Muhammad coming to the mountain, oh, nobody came to us. That is not the issue here. The fact is that nobody claims to have a monopoly of ideas, etc. And we rejected no one. But while I am on my feet, I would venture to add in closing, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I join with all of the other voices on the government benches to commend the rank and file of our membership of the COVID-19 task force, because these individuals come from the length and breadth of the civil service, all senior, all professionals in their own right, and they have not asked for a single penny in terms of the human service that they continue to give to this effort. At this point, we are meeting daily. Nobody is saying, well, I have my child to pick up, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. It's a community effort. And whatever it takes to get us out of this pandemic, we will endeavor to do so. With those words, Madam Deputy Speaker, I take my seat.